Welcome to the But She's Your Mother podcast, where we talk about all things related to being raised by narcissistic parents. Our guests are adult survivors of child abuse. Please note that this podcast is intended for mature audiences and may feature topics such as emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, domestic violence, self-harm, suicide, murder, and eating disorders. Opinions expressed by guests and survivors are their own. Some names may be changed or blocked out to protect minors, victims, and survivors. Thank you for listening to But She's Your Mother, the podcast. Hello, and welcome to all of my listeners and viewers out there, my sibling survivors, and everybody else who just wants to learn how to support a survivor of particularly narcissistic abuse and emotional violence. Welcome to But She's Your Mother. And just like as a survivor of a narcissistic family would understand what it means to have a podcast out there called But She's Your Mother, I have a feeling that you'll also understand when you see the title of a book, The Sky is Red, what that is referring to. But if you don't, well, our special guest today, who is a literal rock star, is going to give you the background and the inspiration and the reason that she has written The Sky is Red. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Tyra to But She's Your Mother, the podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Tyra.
Oh, Marnie, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Can you share with us, first of all, let me just say the title of the book, The Sky is Red, is genius. And if you know, you know. You share with us, I immediately knew when you emailed me, reached out to me, and I saw the title of the book, I went, oh, there's the language I really know and understand all too well. Can you share with us the inspiration behind the book?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a few things. So The Sky is Red. I have a daughter. At the time she was 3.5, 4 years old. And I was trying to come up with creative ways to talk to her about the importance of self-trust because I personally was going through a really hard time. And I was realizing that a lot of the choices that I've made in my life was due to me being gaslighted by many different relationships and even in my past with my family. And I was splitting with my ex. We get along great, but I did want to make sure that she was given the tools to protect herself, just to be able to protect herself from being gaslit. So she was never in a situation that I felt like I was in, where I wasn't really able to trust myself and make these decisions. And as I was going through this, I was realizing how many times in my life I was taught to, or not, I didn't feel free enough to trust myself and my own instinct. And because of that, I made decisions that were kind of pushing my life in a way that I wasn't really happy with. So that to be said, couldn't say all those words to a young child, right? She'd shut you down real quick. So I started thinking of age appropriate ways to talk to her. So I'd be like, hey, daughter, what would you do if a grown up came up to you and said, hey, look at the sky. It looks so red today. And she was like, what? The sky is blue. And I would say, no, 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 I'm a grown up. I'm a grown up. I know more than you. The sky is red. Take a look. And she'd be like, no, no, the sky is blue. And I'm like, but wait a minute. You're saying that you know more than me? You know more than a grown up? I know that the sky is red. Why are you telling me the sky is blue? And she's like, mommy, I can see it. And I'm like, okay, we're on to something here. And she kept asking me to tell that story over and over. She was like, mommy, tell me that crazy story where you act like the weird grown-up that thinks the sky is red. And it was just such an easy way to get her to understand the concept that it's okay to kind of hone into what you see and what you know. And just because somebody is speaking more authoritatively than you or louder than you or saying that they know what's right and you don't, you can be a bit discerning within yourself. It was such an easy concept for her to understand. So hence The Sky is Red was born.
It's so interesting how, as a child who grew up with a mother who's a narcissist, she wouldn't have even had to say to me, "Are you questioning an adult?" Because it would have been right? And I'm so grateful for books like yours and people like you who are being, proactive in making sure that your child, our children, understand that just because it's a person who's an adult doesn't mean that they know everything, and that they do have a right to question, and that they should be, as you said, honing into their skills or their inner feelings about something. And I think too, if this became I hope it is already in schools, but if it's not, it should be a resource, because it's a really good way for teachers to introduce this and be able to even spot children who aren't, accepting that, who are resistant to that, who are afraid of voicing their opinion and their point of view because of a bigger person kind of thing. So I think it has maybe even other applications that maybe you didn't think about, that I didn't even think about until we're talking now, how this could translate into really even a tool for teachers to be able to kind of look and observe and see, oh, wait a minute, this child is still, carrying the line of they can't voice their opinion, because that's a red flag right there, right? Like the sky is red, it's a red flag.
100%. I'm glad that you said that. I have had a few teachers bring this into schools with great feedback. Even when people, they were saying that the children in their classroom were falling victim to peer pressure, and the children didn't feel confident enough to stand in their truth or to make their own decision. I do want to share too, based on what you just said, something so interesting to me that happened. So I started posting a little bit about the book on TikTok. And I just wanted to kind of talk to parents about, hey, this is a great way to kind of teach your young child about gaslighting, protecting them from manipulation, et cetera. And I made this little post, and I don't think any parents comment on it, but it got, Marnie, over a million views, over hundreds of thousands of likes, went super viral with people ages 15 to 25 that were all saying, I wish that my parents would read this. I wish that I was given that platform to believe in myself. I'd get whooped if I said this. Someone even wrote, I can't wait for this book to get banned because parents aren't going to want to get this in the hands of their children. And to me, that was such a heartbreaking comment to read, that this is so many people's experience where their parents are not validating them and letting them know, hey, what you think, what you feel, what you know matters. I'm not in any way saying to not trust adults, but I am absolutely saying there are safe adults and there are not safe adults, and it's okay to be discerning and listen to your heart. And the fact that all these kids are saying that this message would be life-changing to them really opened my eyes even more about how important this message is.
And that's exactly why it needs to be in the schools, for the kids whose parents would want them to have access to that. And it also, anytime that we're building the ability for a child to voice their opinion, or to say yes or to say no, we're also safeguarding them from CSA too. And I
Mm,
think it needs to be said, because that's a part of how children fall prey, right? In that they don't have a voice, that they're more vulnerable, and likely they are pre-groomed in the home in some capacity, because we know that predators don't pick at random. They look for certain traits in children. And one of those traits is the sky is red. Okay, like a child, you can tell that they don't believe it, but they're going to go along to get along kind of thing. So I
yeah.
think it's breaking and also heartening all at the same time, that these young people are saying, yes, we absolutely do need this.
100%. It's incredible. In fact, just to kind of mention too, as the Olympics were obviously just very heavily in rotation, the story of what happened with all the gymnasts with that doctor, right? They suffered abuse by the hands of that doctor that was the adult, right? The safe person. He told, he acted like what he was doing was right. It was okay. And if he was questioned, he had his responses to that. And I do believe that there were even some of the parents that maybe didn't believe what they were hearing from their children, right? Because it's the adult that's in this high, this really respected position, and he's well trusted. So of course that's not happening, right? That's a really scary version of the sky is red, right? And it's painful to see that was what took place.
Yeah, the power of gaslighting and the power of authority, and how it for so many people is hard to push back against, because as bringing that into the room, he had been receiving lots and lots of complaints.
Mm,
It had been going on for years and years and years, and it didn't have to. But
yeah.
people don't want to believe that someone who appears to be good can do something bad.
Yeah. It takes a lot of strength to be the one person to stand up and to speak.
Yeah.
And even in the most well-intentioned relationships, familial and chosen, that empowerment is not being implemented at a young age, right? It's not, right? We're told, listen to what you're told. We know more than you. And a lot of times it's well-intentioned, right? Your parents want to protect you, or your parents are looking out, or they believe that they're looking out, but even when they're trying to do their best, sometimes it's not, because they still feel, I know more, I know more, I know more. You're the child, I'm the parent, right? And then there's other, of course, extreme cases, as you are aware of, where something like this would, really, really help empower you as well. So yeah,
And
trust.
yeah, I mean, as parents, we do know more, but delivery matters and words matter, right? And I think that this is the building of resilience through positive experiences. And that's how we should be building resilience in children, not in spite of, things that they're going through. And unfortunately, a lot of times resilience is being built through negative and really harmful experiences.
Agreed. So another point that I want to make, another reason why The Sky is Red, I feel, is really important, is that in co-parenting relationships, this book could be really useful, especially when one of the co-parents is a narcissist and the split is toxic. You cannot protect your young children from what they're going to hear about you at the other parent's house. You cannot say, hey, your other parent might tell you these stories about me, but they're not true. You can't do that with the young children. You can't paint the other co-parent as a liar, because the other parent is half of your child. So how can you protect your child from manipulation, from gaslighting that they might suffer from the toxic parent? The only way to do that, the kryptonite to gaslighting, is self-trust, right? So this book was created to kind of give that platform to say, hey, you can trust your experience. You don't need to always trust just what's being fed to you. Listen to yourself, trust your experience, trust what you see. This can help that child, help arm that child to guard themselves against whatever they might hear about their healthy parent from their toxic parent. So it's kind of like the anti-gaslighting book without ever mentioning gaslighting to a young child. Oh, it's kind of like the anti-gaslighting book without ever mentioning the word or term gaslighting. So this way, this message can be accepted and digested by a young child, to kind of give them that superpower of self-trust, so they can go to the other parent's home, and even if their positive parent is being trashed, but, or their lies are being fed to them, they have the best chance of listening to what they know and what they feel is true, and not accepting the other parent's reality.
So really, it's helping them tune in and trust their critical thinking, and it helps them to question things rather than just take them blindly.
Mm,
Um, which is what we all need to do as human beings. But children, it's being developed in them or it's not. And when they have those conflicting households and situations, they really do need something that, I guess, in a way keeps them company. It almost becomes their friend. It's their superpower, which is, I think, a part of the, I'm not going to speak for you, but that resonates for me, because children need that superpower. They need to be able to look at this as this is a positive thing that makes me more powerful and braver, and be able to put them inside themselves inside that cape. So I really love that aspect of the book. And I don't want to give things away. I want people to purchase it and read it and give it as gifts to their kids and grandkids and all of that. But there is an element of standing up for yourself is something to be rewarded and awarded for, kind of thing, right? And I love, love, love that.
I love the way that you summed that up, and 100%. I mean, there's one person that's always consistently going to be with you for your whole life, no matter where you are, and that's you.
Yeah.
right? So that inner strength and that confidence and that self-trust and that self-validation is so important. And it's so, so hard to get that as an adult. It is so much easier if you're being grown up that way and inherit those traits as a child, and then a child that trusts themselves grows into an adult that trusts themselves, and just it gets stronger that way. Yeah.
100%. And I think, I hate to split genders, but I'm going to because it's applicable. When we're talking about girls and boys, I was watching a video the other day on YouTube, and it was a study that they did with kids. And
Mm,
they fed the kids, I think it was a cookie or ice cream, something like that, with salt in it. And almost all of the girls, none, you could see on their face, it doesn't taste good. There's a shock to it. And they're like, mm-hmm. And they're being really nice. And they're not saying, I don't really like it, or, okay, that's enough, whatever.
mm,
They're going with it, and they're pretending, because there's something, in our DNA that puts us more in that direction. But then society breeds that into us, not just in our homes, but even on the outside. We're supposed to
mm,
be, good little girls, and go along and all of that, and not push back. And if you do, there's names that get attached and all this, that, and the other. All of the boys, every single one in this study, I don't really like it. Or, some of them were a little more brash, we're like, what did you do? Almost kind of thing. And when the kids were questioned, the girls were like, I didn't want to hurt their feelings.
mm.
Boys were like, well, I didn't want to hurt their feelings, but I didn't like it.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Really interesting. And I think all children need to be empowered. So I don't want anyone to like get me wrong here. I'm just saying that this is another layer, particularly for people who have daughters, to recognize that inherently, we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Not that boys want to, but we just look at it differently.
Sure. Yeah. That thinking.
I have a son, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
taking anything away from the boys.
I, and when I'm thinking I agree. And then I'm also thinking my daughter would have spit it out and said, this is terrible. Probably
Because to her,
the
the sky is not red.
this guy is not right with her.
So outside of, wanting from your own personal experience, your daughter to, have these skills from the outset, because of times that, I guess you kind of said, I've had relationships where, they weren't the healthiest, and, you didn't have that kind of inner voice to avoid. Maybe you had the inner voice, but not the outer voice to avoid certain situations. Were there other things at play, other inspirations in there that led you to write the book in this particular way, or just inspired you outside of that?
Sure. Great question. I mean, I've always been really passionate about just emotional health and mental health and confidence for children. I've been a performer for my whole life. I've been a singer and I've traveled the world as a singer. And with that career comes a lot of no's and rejection and just, hearing that you're not good enough. And it's really easy to quit on yourself, and you have to be so internally strong to continue on with a career like that. So I've always wanted to help children get to that place of strength where they can believe in themselves, believe in their talents, and work hard for themselves, regardless of what they're hearing from others. So that was a big inspiration. However, nothing inspired me more than what I've experienced in my relationships. Uh, Especially, it was so funny. It's almost I don't want to, not like split personalities, but like a split life. Like here I was, right? This singer that was touring the world. I toured with some of the biggest stars in the business. I've been very blessed in my career. Um, Standing on stage and everyone's like, wow, she's so confident. And then I would be off stage and I would be in these relationships with the people that knew me and loved me the most. And I would be the most unconfident person where they're making me lose all of that. Like it was the total opposite, so uh, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the just leaving me feel like I wasn't good enough at all. It almost felt like it was just such a huge disconnect from the career that I had and the person that I did believe I was, to then what I was allowing to take place in my life. And it just, that was a huge wake up call for me, right? It was like, if this could happen to me, if this is happening to me, like this could happen, especially to children or, to anybody, right? So I really kind of wanted to help not only get myself out of those situations, but also kind of help inspire others. Gaslighting is so toxic. I think it is one of the worst forms of abuse, just because it's so subtle. And it's not, it's not like something that you could say, hey, I'm being abused right now. It took me years and years and years to understand what was happening. I was slowly being made to doubt myself. It was slow. And then, gaslighting isn't just a lie. It's a lie coupled with, and you're crazy to even think this. You're crazy. And this would happen to me so many different times in so many different ways, right? I could say the word subtly. Thank you. Subtly. It would happen so subtly that it's not like you could say, well, this person is trying to hurt me. I just started to believe that there was something wrong with me. Right. And then having to get out on stage and to do these other things where I was this confident person, I felt it, but I also didn't feel it because of that abuse. Right. And it started showing up. And I knew that I needed to make a big change in my life, but I was also so inspired to help make changes in other people's lives.
Yeah, and I mean the thing with gaslighting, Dr. Romani was talking about this the other day, or I mean, talks about it all the time, but I
Yeah.
caught a video. She's my favorite, or among my favorites. But she was saying how there's a difference between a gaslighter and a liar. A liar eventually will give up. A liar, when you
Mm.
call them out and you point out, like you can, if you have it in black and white and you say, this is the text, you told me this, they will cave. They will. A
Yeah,
gaslight will never cave. A
ever.
gaslight will never admit, they will never say no. And it's that power of their commitment that is so difficult to fight against, right? And that's what makes it's subtle, it's slow burning, it's insidious, and then it's not so subtle anymore because once they know they have you in a place of um, where that confidence has really been eroded, where you have even a codependence on them, you're looking for their approval and all that. They know when they've gotten into that sweet spot, then they don't sugarcoat it as much. They keep going ahead with it. And they now, instead of taking off little chips, are taking away blocks, right? And that's where it comes back to what you said earlier. The one relationship we're going to have in our life always and forever is the one that we have with ourselves. And teaching children skills about trusting themselves is also building their relationship with themselves. And a person who has a strong relationship with themselves where they treat themselves well, they speak to themselves well with love and kindness and care, has a lower tolerance to be connected to people who don't meet the bar of our self-treatment. And catching them young like that, I'm excited to see how I'm seeing it already. I see it in my own clients, particularly my early 20s to like mid 30s clients. They are so far ahead of where our last generation was in just being able to trust themselves once they've gotten to that point of building that relationship with themselves. And they're so much more they understand so much better that just because you're related to somebody or there's somebody of authority or whatever it is, doesn't mean we owe them a relationship if they aren't being kind and showing up with love and respect, right?
Agreed. Yeah. It's funny. I think like probably I'm thinking 30 years or 20 years ago, we didn't have access to anything besides what our parents decided to allow us access to. So the fact that, these kids these days are able to access the resources they feel they need. There's a quick Google search, right? It is so helpful. On the flip side of that, though, there is so much gaslighting that happens on social media too, right? So it's just kind of finding that balance, but it's wonderful, wonderful, and so exciting that these resources are being made available and introduced to kids that in our day, man, that sounds like I'm saying we're old. We're not old, but obviously those computers were not around at that time. So, I mean, I was only told what my mom
Yeah.
told me, I thought she was a genius until recently. And now I'm like, oh man, no.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
like my saving grace was, or one of my healing tools, because it was long before the internet, was Mommy Dearest. Seeing that movie
Mm,
and reading that book, because that's a lot of my story. That's all I had. That was it.
man.
That and going to therapy. So it is. And of course there's a light side and a dark side to everything, right? And unfortunately, we do have to become strong enough in our own character and our own belief in ourselves to be able to weed through the things that are harmful on the internet, because
Yeah.
there there's an upside and a downside, just like to anything.
It's great that you mentioned Dr. Ramani, because that was also where I was kind of finding a lot of comfort and really easy to understand explanations as far as what I was experiencing and what I have experienced. And I think she had a video, is how to protect your children from gaslighting. And it really, I think that kind of also inspired me in the sense to kind of create a resource for that, because there weren't any. I spent a lot of time Googling, how to talk to your kid about gaslighting, how to get kids to stand up for themselves. And there, it seemed like that was kind of a subject that there wasn't a lot of books or resources or videos around. So that was another reason why I was kind of, it forced my hand to come up with a creative story myself from my daughter, which now I'm very grateful for. So now when you search children gaslighting book, The Sky is Red comes up. So
I love that. I
able
love
to
that.
live it.
Well, I mean, and also Dr. Ram, I love Dr. Ramani. I think that I just find her to be not only so knowledgeable, obviously, on the area of narcissistic personality disorder and talking about what those relationships look like and don't look like. She's encouraging people to heal in whatever works for them, but with a lot of reality attached to it. Because some people want to navigate relationships with people who are narcissistic. Maybe it's a family member or something like that. And she's letting everybody know, listen, you can choose to do that, but know that that other person, no matter what you do, isn't going to change. The only person or behavior you can change is your own, and determining how that's valuable to you and things like that. And I think it's really, really important, because the therapy of the past and the therapists of the past have been a lot of, well, but it's your mother. There's a reason I named my podcast, but it's your mother. And if you can find a way to establish the relationship, you should. Now, if that had been my husband, they would have told me to run for the hills.
Sure.
So I love Dr. Ramani for a plethora of reasons, because I think that her the way that she expresses and talks about narcissism beyond the part that's extremely factual, and her experience on trying to treat narcissists and people who have suffered from it, but it's also done in such a way that is meant for people to heal and to understand what it is and how it works. And like your book, there's not a lot of professionals or resources out there that fall into that category, like at that high end.
Sure. Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I'm a fan as well, as I am of yours too. I think that one thing you guys both have in common actually is just you're coming from a place of like such authenticity, and and you're vulnerable. So it's like you're really helping and reaching people, which is one of the reasons why I was excited to reach out to you. Just so you know, I think you're amazing.
I'm so glad that you did. Talking, I know I kind of let the cat out of the bag in the superhero, and I gave my perspective of how I feel about it, but I would like to know why you chose to go in this superhero direction in the book.
I truly and strongly believe that there are certain traits that are superpower traits, right? That's self-confidence, that's self-validation, that's self-trust, all those things, right? Without that, you're not standing strong. You're not super, right? I shouldn't say you're not super, but you're not as powerful as needed, right? Those things make you powerful, and they help you navigate through life. It is the kryptonite, right? Having those superpowers it's the kryptonite to being manipulated, right? Because somebody that is strong within themselves, somebody that trusts themselves, somebody that knows themselves, they're not going to blindly follow anybody and anything, right? They're going to stand on their own. They're going to stand strong like a superhero, right? It was really important to me to kind of, I didn't, so in the, without giving too much away, I didn't want to spend time talking negatively about the gaslighter of the book. I wanted to spend time talking wonderfully about the person that didn't allow themselves to be gaslighted. So that person became a superhero. Children can relate with the fact that a superhero is somebody that is strong. So it was a really easy concept to grasp too. It was just, it's this was, this story was created without thinking that I was creating a story, right? I was just talking to my daughter and I was just trying to come up with another one of my silly metaphors. I'm like metaphor queen of the world. And I was just trying to come up with little stories for her that were fun and exciting. And I just kind of kept going with it. And it just kind of like happened. I wasn't striving to make it a superhero story. It just kind of organically got there because I saw what she was grasping to. But it makes so much perfect sense because those traits are superpowers, right? It makes us strong in our lives. It helps us achieve the things that we want to achieve. It makes us feel good about ourselves and it helps us prevent ourselves from danger, protect ourselves from danger, which is the gaslighting and manipulation, etc. So that would be why I chose to go with that.
And I really love what you said about focusing on the positive reinforcement, focusing on becoming that superhero instead of focusing on the person who actually doesn't deserve the attention. So I think it goes, you know, in some layers in there where even subconsciously a child is getting the message of we're going to look at the superhero more than we're going to look at the person who's trying to steal your cape kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%, especially because in their lives, we don't know who that gaslighter is, right? If that gaslighter is, like I said, one of their parents, that is half of who they are. We don't want to send the message that, hey, half of who you are, half of your makeup is bad or is choosing to do bad things. We don't want that. We don't want to do that to the child. That's such a bad message to give a child because they're going to internalize that they're 50% bad. So instead, I want to say, hey, you are amazing when you stand strong in yourself. You know, you are unstoppable when you stand strong on yourself. Let's focus on that instead of on the other person. So yeah, that was a big really big important part for me.
And I think that's especially beneficial when you're talking about a child who is being raised in one of those, I don't call them co-parenting, I call them shared parenting households
Sure.
because you can't co-parent with somebody who's narcissistic. You're sharing a child. That's the reality, right? And so they're already receiving that messaging from that toxic parent that there's something wrong with the other parent, which means that there's something wrong with them. So this, I think, also helps reinforce, no, that's not the case. That's not what's true. What's true is how I present in the world and who I want to be, you know, kind of thing, and starting to separate and building that independence as a little person becoming a bigger person kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think about my childhood. And my mom and my dad split when I was 7, and my mom did her best. She had relationships that were brought home that were not always the best. She did her best, but when I think back, there was a lot of gaslighting going on and a lot of things going on it was just toxic experiences, but I thought the world of my mom. A book like this, I would have never allowed myself to think anything negative about her, especially at that time, right? But a book like this would have given me the tools that I needed to realize, hey, you know what? Maybe what I'm seeing is actually happening, and it's not great. Like I wouldn't feel like I was saying something negative about the person that I loved, right? I would just have the tools to stand stronger in myself, so it wouldn't affect me as much as it did.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have pre-groomed you for what went on later on
Yeah.
in your life, because that's what that does, right? It normalizes something that should never be normalized.
Which is why I'm so passionate about not normalizing that for my daughter.
So in saying that, what is the message that you would like to leave behind for parents who out there, adults out there who are concerned about children?
I would love to share with parents that sometimes sometimes we're thinking that accepting when we're wrong is a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength. And when our children see us being vulnerable and allowing them to have their voice matter and allowing them to share their opinions and their feelings and allowing them to be discerning, even to their parents at times, it not only strengthens your child, but it really shows them how strong you are as well. Uh, Children that trust themselves, I'll say this again, grow into strong, independent people that don't just blindly follow a crowd because that's what everyone's doing. They can stand up better to peer pressure. They can not follow the people that are making the wrong choice because they're confident that they know what the right choice is. Sure. Is there a little bit of pushback from your children at times because you're empowering them? Yes, but that's a good thing. That's what we want. We want children that question things. We want children that know that their voices matter because when they get out in the world, right, they're not always going to be home. They're going to be out in the world and they're going to be by themselves, taking care of themselves. And we want them to know, hey, yeah, your ideas are worth giving a second glance to. You're worth listening to. It's just it's so important. It's so important. We want to raise leaders. We want to raise confident leaders, and empowering self-trust is step one.
I love, 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 love that. I mean, I think that sometimes parents don't understand that our children aren't meant to switch gears. And what they're learning in the home is what they're bringing outside the home. And if you're teaching a child blind obedience, then that's what you're sending out into the world as a child who's going to be an adult in blind obedience. And that's when they get into trouble and get into harm's way and things like that. And sure, it's not fun when our kids question us, especially when they become teenagers. But if you can take a step back as a parent and go, I built a child who could question me, who could have a conversation, and who I can bring that all the way through with, which also means I've taught them conflict resolution, and then not going to die and fall apart or be judged and abandoned for having their own voice. And if they are, then they're with in the wrong relationship. All of those things make for a person who's going to go out into the world at such a tremendous advantage instead of a disadvantage when you're trying to raise children in that blind obedience, which should never happen.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And I kind of want to add on too, because a li- someone can maybe say, well, isn't that kind of teaching your kid not to respect authority or not to respect their parents? 100% no. Actually, this will make them respect you so much more because you're not just bombarding them with what you need them to think, feel, and know. You're allowing them to also be a thinking, functioning human being with their own feelings. That's actually going to grow so much more respect from your child than just telling them to respect you and not giving them a voice.
Yeah, well, we teach by example, and children, especially young children, are visual learners. They're observers, right? They're watching your interactions with other people, they're watching how you interact with them. And if it doesn't look respectful, then they're learning that that's okay. That's how they learn that disrespect that some parents fear so much. And
Mm.
teaching children that you can share how you're feeling about something and be respectful at the same time is part of the key of that. And sometimes maybe they're not going to be so respectful, but then that's when you have a conversation. This is, children are not supposed to be teaching themselves.
Yeah.
For them. And if we're dysregulated and flying off the handle and saying, you don't respect me, and screaming at them, well, are you respecting them in that moment? Not so much. And I think that it's easy, and look, nobody's perfect. We get frustrated. We lose our mind from time to time. But then also, how do you handle that? You teach respect by giving respect.
100%. And I definitely have to step back at times. I mean, I'm a human being and I do get frustrated and I react in a way that maybe I'm not the proudest of in that moment, but I'll take a second and I'll step back and I'll say, hey, I want to talk to you about how I just reacted. I don't, how did you feel about that? I feel like I could have made a better choice. In that moment, I didn't make the right choice. How could I have communicated that to you in a way that that you would have appreciated more. We just talk about it. And I'm very quick to apologize when I know that I could have made a better choice. And that's what I want to teach her. You know, it's about the choices that we make. Everything that we do is a choice, right? I mean, we're not perfect people. We're not robots. We're not running by AI yet, right? You know, so all we can do is our best. But the best thing to do is to know that this is it's me and you, right? It's not just me,
Yeah.
right?
Well, Tyra, I want to thank you so much for being on But She's Your Mother. Will you please tell people where we can find your fabulous book and also show us your fabulous book?
I would love to. And thank you so much for having me. It's been so awesome to chat with you. This is The Sky is Red, and it's available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and in TikTok shop as well. And I'm so excited for you guys to check it out.
I'm excited too. I've read the book. I think it is amazing and spot on. I think it's going to be such a great tool for children. I'd love to see it grow into a curriculum in schools. And I just think it's really a really palatable way to teach a child what gaslighting is without using these adult terms and villainizing people and things like that, but rather building them up into the superheroes that we know that they already are. Thank you so much again, Tyra, for being on But She's Your Mother.
You're awesome, Marnie. Thank you so much.